Welcome, everyone, to the 10th video in the 11-part series on bringing up boys. We're going to see portions of several sessions today where the guests in the audience were invited to ask their own questions and share their views. Without exception, I think, each of the presentations were followed by very lively and meaningful interactions on the issues and the ideas that I had raised. In some ways, that may have been the most stimulating and helpful aspect of what we've attempted to do. So let's go again to the Welcome Center here at Focus on the Family and the first question.
You mentioned that that period after 18 months and around 5 is crucial for the son to be pulling away from mom.
Yes.
What if at that time the father's going through his own crisis and he's working a lot, he's not home a lot, and his participation in the family kind of resolves when the son's older. This is my case.
Yes.
And dad wants to be a great dad, wants to, teach his son. Can you get back what you...
Yeah. The sad thing is that situation that you described is the typical family scene today. Because in early marriage and early childhood, dads are busier than they'll ever be. They're trying to get started. They've started a business. They're trying to make it in their work, and they are just overwhelmed with these responsibilities. So this is the typical scenario. And the question that you asked could be asked by women everywhere. There is no real simple answer to it because it is a need that is either going to be met or not met. This is why I'm talking about this today. I do hope that some men will see this video and recognize that this is not simply a matter of a passing need at home. This is the foundational relationship that is going to make differences for years to come. Now, some kids, by their temperament, make it anyway. Most of them do, but many of them don't. And where that occurs, you've got to find a male role model somewhere. And if dad is gone and just simply can't meet that need, you better find an uncle or a little later on a coach or somebody who can teach that boy what it means to be a man.
Well, having passed that point, and my son's almost 13, can you play catch up is, I guess, my question.
I think it's never too late to build a relationship like that, and a teenage boy and his father can still bond together. And a lot depends on the temperament, and I don't want to make it look like it's, it's forever lost, but it will be forever different. So there is much that you can still do. Yes?
I guess it's my belief that when you're raising a son, it's a little bit different than a daughter from the standpoint that when your son starts getting into manhood, he has to have these experiences where he's letting the air under his tires.
Yes.
How do you provide a healthy way for him to do that where he doesn't get hurt, recognizing that in part they have to do it?
Yes.
I wish they didn't. It seems like in part they indeed have to experience it.
It's a wonderful question because boys do need to do that. They do need to let it out. They do need to experiment. They do need to rebel a little bit. And you do have to allow that. I think you need to select the battles that you're willing to fight. One of them may be keeping the room clean. And mothers will love me for that. It may be that that's not worth fighting over. It's a whole lot better to let that go than to be dealing with drugs or other things. And I think it's also important to understand that boys are like this. This is not just some crazy thing that is characteristic of your boys. It is how boys are. And so I don't think you overreact. In one of my books, Parenting Isn't for Cowards, I talked about the fact that our job as parents is to just get them through it. That may not sound like great advice, but that's really what it comes down to. Just get them through it because they will settle down. And they turn 20 and 21 and 22 and things begin to change. And you can't fix them entirely when they're 14, 15, 16, 17. And so you decide what you absolutely have to fight over, and you give just a little bit on the other things. Yes?
Have there been any studies on homeschooled boys versus public or private schooled boys?
There have been a lot of them, and I have to tell you that I am very biased in the direction of homeschooling because I have seen that. The homeschool kids conform to these principles that I'm talking about. And here at Focus on the Family, the homeschool groups come through for field trips. And I'm telling you, they are different kids. They are different, and they are better for the most part. They look adults in the eye. They talk. They communicate like adults. They're more interested in the things around them. They're less browbeaten by the culture and by what takes place frequently in schools, both public and Christian. And I really do believe in homeschooling, and the parents are there for them morning, noon, night, and bedtime. You know, and the studies show this. I mean, academically, you see what's just happening in the academic realm. I don't know if you have been following this, but homeschoolers win almost all the spelling bees and the geography bees that take place out there. They're in the Ivy League schools. They're doing well, sometimes at 16, 17, 18 years of age. Many people are opposed to homeschooling because they say that it is isolating and that they don't get socialized properly. If you know anything about homeschooling, that's just not the way it is. The kids are still involved in church. They're still involved in the neighborhood. There are homeschooling organizations that get them involved. There are all kinds of things that they do together. It's not isolating. But if being bullied and being given drugs or other things that typically happen in the public school is what we mean by socialization, we could do with a whole lot less of it. Yes?
Where does the trust factor come into play raising a boy? Or is there a trust factor?
Not much. You can make a very big mistake by assuming that everything is okay when you're not looking. I think you have to stay in touch. I remember Carol Burnett's daughter got into drugs, and I just remember her going on television saying she trusted her daughter, and she's regretted it ever since. She should have been watching. She should have been listening. You know, there's so many dangers out there. There's so many influences. There's so many social settings where your kids will be wounded and hurt and enticed into evil things. You've got to stay in touch. And the notion that you just kind of close your eyes and hope is a recipe for disaster. That doesn't mean you read the diary, but it might. If you think your child is taking drugs, you better read the diary. That's just my opinion. You guys disagree with me, don't you? Over here.
I raised 4 boys and 2 girls. And you have to be in touch and in tune with the boys. It wasn't easy. My husband was a truck driver, so you can imagine he was cross country.
Yes.
But there's still, if you can stay on top of it by listening to the children and generally always look at their eyes. I read eyes about so many people. I was a trained waitress. And you can tell when if they're not high on because you can't smell the alcohol, you can see something else in their eyes, and it'll always tell that, yes, we had one of our boys on drugs. And if we wouldn't have been on tune.
Yeah, you'd have never known it.
No.
Yeah.
Never.
Well, you've just illustrated something else. I talk often about my dad, how much I appreciate him and the impact that he's had on me. But my father was an evangelist, and he was gone. My dad was gone sometimes 6 weeks at a time. But when he came home, he was mine. You've got to find some way in your set of circumstances to make it work. In his case, when he would come home, we hunted together, we fished together, we made things in the garage together. Then he was gone again, but it still worked. And in your case, your husband's a truck driver. That's a tough assignment for a family. And when he came home, he's probably tired. But you've got to work your kids into it. And if you don't, the consequences are there. Over here.
I heard you say earlier that it's never too late to bond. But I'm wondering if you could be a little bit more specific. In your lecture, you talked about from 0 to 18 months and a boy bonding with his mom and that being so critical. Could you give some specific advice about, say, a 5-year-old who now has 2 great parents who are absolutely there for him and very available, but for those first 18 months did not have a parent and was separated, and now is experiencing, I think, some loss, or
Yes.
I'm not exactly sure what those issues are, but could you be more specific about how you can go back and almost reparent?
You know what? You do the best you can with what you got. Life is never ideal. There's a problem with every family. You know, there are illnesses that affect the mother or dad or the kids. There are financial difficulties. Sometimes mom and dad are having difficulty with each other. There's always something. It's never perfect. It's never ideal. And in the case that you described, it can be a real handicap where you have kids that didn't get what they needed. If you adopt a child after 2 years of age, you will see evidences of whatever that child has experienced. And what does that mean? You dump the child? He's not worthy to be in your family? Of course not. You take him where he is and you do with him what you can. It may not be the same. You can't go back and reprogram, but there's a lot that you can do. And that's where we all are. You know, every one of us who are parents can describe things that we wish had been a little different in our family and in our home. That's the way it is. You mentioned the strong-willed child that you have. That's tough too, but that's human nature. That's the way we are. And you do the best you can with what you have to work with. Okay, back there.
I am at home with all 3 of my children, and I was just kind of curious, how can you, when your husband has when he's a professional and he's not home as much, how can you kind of play both roles? How can you be a loving mother, but also kind of play that role of passing the ball back and forth?
Yeah. Well, that's tough. There are an awful lot of mothers that have that responsibility, especially the single mother. And many of them do it very well. Many of them who have no man in their life at all look for those alternatives. Boys Club, Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts. Look for a neighbor. Look for someone who can help get that job done. But it's going to have to come from somewhere other than you. You can do those things you can do in terms of disciplining and training and guiding and doing the things I talked about today. But ultimately, that boy needs a man. And he's made that way, and you've got to find one. The hope is that you can help your husband see that this will not be forever, but for right now, this is absolutely critical. And he's got to reserve time for the boys in the family. If not, let's get him into things where there's a male role model coming from another source. Okay, over here? Yes.
You had a list earlier of 4 things that a father needed to pass on to his son.
Yes.
Is there such a list for a mother?
It's more of the same. The father just needs to play the primary role, but the mother still has to discipline and train and guide. And in those cases where the father is not a spiritual leader, the mother's got to do that job.
I just wanted to thank you because as a woman who is dating right now and looking for my possible mate, it hurts to know that you have to plan how much money you're going to take with you on a date. And many times on dates, you don't know if you're going to be protected, and that always hurts. And a lot of times when you meet men, there isn't much leadership or the spiritual maturity. And I'm recently learning that these things that are what men are supposed to have. And it is such a stress and relieving burden off of myself that I can finally take the role of the woman.
There is so much in what you just said. First of all, you're confirming what I said earlier, that frequently guys do expect girls to pay for their meal or for their entertainment. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
And what did you say when that happens?
Well, a lot of times you just go along with it because you don't really know what else to say, because then a lot of times they refer, well, if I'm going to pay for this, then later on in the night. And then it's just cut to the chase in the beginning, and then you go home.
Okay, you get stuck once. How about twice?
Oh, with the same person?
Yeah. Would you go out with that person again? That's it. That's it. Let me ask the girls that are here from the Institute. Has this also been a problem for you? Have you seen it happen? Is this what guys do now? Shirley said, "El cheapo."
Oh, well, I think that, yeah, dates, boys don't always pay. It's kind of, well, we're going out and I'll have money and you'll have money. The guys at the Institute are, I think, exceptional. I think that's why they're here.
Do you agree? Do you agree? Do you agree that you ought to object to that? Do you object to it?
I think that if I knew better how to, I probably would, but
yeah. So you just go along with it.
Go along and then not go out with him again.
Yeah. How about those that don't call in advance but just sort of expect you to be ready?
That's not going to happen. My mom told me once she will never let me go out with a guy that honks in the driveway. You won't walk out the door, Laura, if he honks.
Let's hear it for her mother. Take the microphone. Respond to this.
Oh, I would say the same thing. You know, boys should. I heard some stuff when I was growing up. You know, boys should call by Monday, at least Tuesday, if you're going to go out by Friday. And I think that's really been lost. And I think sort of a preciousness of being taken care of and being appreciated for who you are and just being valued. I think that's being lost a lot.
Let me ask you a question. Do you call guys?
No, not. I mean, boys who are friends, I think, but not to. You know, be starting something or kindling something, I think.
Let me ask the guys who are here. How would you... give them the microphone. Okay. How would you feel about a girl calling you and asking for a date?
I don't think I would like it very much. I think it kind of robs, like if a girl called me and was interested in asking me out, I think it would rob me of my just internal desire to be the one who instigates a relationship.
Does that happen?
You get a girl call and ask me out? Heck yeah. It has happened before, but it was mostly like with friends, and it was never with someone that I wasn't comfortable enough like to say, yeah, we'll go get ice cream or something like that. But I'd like also to comment on I don't think all the hope is lost. I mean, I know that nobody here is really saying that, but like I have an incredible family. My father was one who wasn't just a spiritual leader. I mean, I'm in a male-dominated household, and me and my brothers and my dad would just sit around and just grunt, because that's just being a man.
That's sure impressive.
We would do this, but at the same time, I would walk in on my parents on their knees by their bed praying for their kids.
Yeah.
And my father was one who I could watch him cry. And he was one that stepped out and not only was interested in me developing as a male, but he discipled me to follow Jesus Christ. And I mean, like my dad is the most incredible man that I've ever met. And
I'd like to meet your dad.
Yeah, you really need to. And seriously. And just to see the kind of the unity and the bond of my dad is allowing me to get air under my tire, but at the same time was teaching me to follow Jesus Christ. And that's what our society needs, obviously, but man, it's encouraging for me to see that, man, not all the hope is lost. We are we're raising up men, godly men in this nation. I'm excited about the next generation.
Well, you're a very fortunate young man, I can tell you that. Let me ask you this. Were you taught to open a door for a woman?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was, like when you were talking about walking on the curb, you know, and then if you're walking a lady down the stairs, to walk a step in front of her in case she stumbles and falls, you're there to catch. To open doors to the car, to open the door for the car, then walk around to open doors to the restaurant.
You know what?
Chairs.
There are a lot of women like to find you, man.
Well, I got in serious trouble if I didn't, so just growing up. So.
Let me ask the others of you. This is wonderful stuff. Tell me if guys open doors for you. How about it? Do they typically now?
I think so. Especially over at the Institute, the guys are awesome. Just we were over at an apartment one night, and I was walking back to mine, and I was asking one of the guys, well, okay, where do you live? And he goes, I live here, but I'm walking you back to your apartment. And we had just been at a meeting, and that just really meant a lot to me. Just that we'd only known each other 2 weeks, and if even that much, and just how much these men, I don't want to even call them guys, these men have taken an interest in us, not in a relationship like I want to be your girlfriend or boyfriend type thing, but as a brother and sister in Christ, and that they are truly protecting us. And I have 3 little brothers, and I'm so thankful that my parents raised them that way, that they are to open the door. And my question for you is, for the girls, with the parents that are raising girls, do they teach them to expect that from guys?
They probably don't, and that's the other half of the formula here. The mothers should teach their daughters, mothers and fathers should teach their daughters how the system is supposed to work. This is a wonderful idea. It's the way males and females are supposed to relate to each other. And with the feminist movement in the late 60s and the early 70s, where everything turned upside down, all of that has been lost. And you got a whole generation of kids who don't understand what you understand, haven't been taught what you've been taught. And the guys that you're talking about here at the Institute. And that's why I'm trying to address this here. You know, there is a traditional relationship between males and females. It is wonderful. It's based on mutual respect and responsibility, and it's based on how a man is supposed to treat a woman. And I regret the fact that many men have no clue about how that's supposed to work. Let me ask you, in a formal situation, we're not talking about McDonald's now, in a formal situation, would you help your date with her chair?
Yeah, I think that would be a good way of showing a respect and a consideration for a date. I don't know, I probably forget a lot of times because either we're sitting in a booth or, you know.
Well, don't you ever forget it again, okay?
I promise, girls.
All right. Okay, go ahead.
Dr. Dobson, you really haven't mentioned today, I can tell, even without reading your book, that the role of grandparents.
Oh, my.
In terms of filling in, taking the position of the male model and helping the children grow. The role of just board games in teaching, playing by the rules and character and losing gracefully and learning how to relate to others. It's been so important in the past.
Let me tell you something about that. Shirley's folks are incredible people. Her mother is turning 91, and her stepfather is turning 90.
You will not want that on this tape.
We won't let them see it. They are just wonderful people. I love them as much as I loved my own parents, and they're still very feisty. You think Shirley's feisty? I can tell you where she got it. Shirley's mother, 91 now, walks around the house with a transistor radio on her shoulder, in her robe, and she's listening to the radio. She's not listening to me. She's listening to Rush Limbaugh. And I say, Alma, why don't you listen to me anymore? And she says, oh, Jimmy, I've heard everything you got to say. But Joe, now just turning 90, is an incredible guy. He can still beat me at golf, which doesn't say a whole lot because I'm not good at golf, but he beats everybody. That guy's 90 years old. He hits that ball straight down the fairway. He loves board games, which is why your question recalled this to me. We were just there about a month ago, and he beat me at everything we did. He beat me at backgammon. He beat me at hearts. He beat me at everything he did. And he just laughed. He's a highly competitive guy. I talk about him in the book. But they have a family life there that's gone. When the book Bowling Alone came out, and I read those characteristics of today's family, what stood before me was Joe and Alma Kubista and their family life. Do you know that young people love to go down and spend a weekend with them? Who else do you know who's 90, 91 years of age, and young people enjoy being there? Why? Because they play games. They talk. There's food. There's laughter. And our daughter's friends who live 30 minutes or 45 minutes from there love to go see her grandparents because it's that kind of family that we've lost. It's not there anymore. One of Danae's friends, at 35 years of age, drove all the way down there. It was an hour from their house. He was being moved by his business to New York, and he brought a rose and drove all the way down there to plant it in their backyard so they wouldn't forget him. And why? Because that's the way families are supposed to look. That's the way they're supposed to function. And we played games. Did you all play board games when you were young? You know, that was a bonding time. Did you guys play board games? Yeah. Well, that again is what I'm trying to get at. All right, one more question. Got one more. Yes.
Dr. Dobson, I'd like to go back to your story about the automobile.
Yeah.
And had your father heard about that story via the grapevine, do you think he should have just let that slide? Or, I mean, I'm wondering, what kind of guidelines should we let the boys get away with under the fact that boys are boys?
I would not have driven for 2 years if my dad had known that. There's a safety issue there.
Right.
And there's also a stupid issue involved there. My dad would not have tolerated that.
Okay.
There's some things you take a stand on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean to imply a permissive kind of environment like we've talked about before. You know, I wrote the book, Dare to Discipline. I mean, I believe in discipline. But there are some things worth fighting about, and there are some things that aren't.
Right. And I'm wondering about the boys will be boys phrase. You know,
Yeah.
how are we going to be able to let some things slide and really push?
Yeah. You can agree that boys will be boys and still discipline.
Mm-hmm.
You can understand this is the way boys are and still require them to do better. And I'm not implying in any way that we should not take that role and assume that responsibility. But you still ought to understand that boys are different than girls, especially in regard to this kind of stupid stuff. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you being here. Well, that's the way we ended our session, although I really wish that we could have talked to even more of our guests. You know, I had the feeling that we could have gone on talking for another day or two. So for today, thanks for being with us, and God's blessings to you.